Welcome to a Slice of Medieval Christmas special. This year we decided to do something a little different. We invited our friendly rivals over at Rock, Paper, Swords, Matthew Harffy and Stephen A. McKay, to join us for a Christmas special. But what to talk about? Books, podcasting, the year behind us and the year ahead, and my embarrassing favourite Christmas song. So without further ado, it's over to Matthew.
Hello, my name is Matthew Harffy.
And my name is Sharon Bennett Connolly.
And my name is Stephen A. McKay.
And my name is Birks.
We're all best-selling historical fiction authors. Well, except Sharon, who does non-fiction. And today, as the Christmas season is upon us, we are doing something a bit different. Rock, Paper, Swords is joining forces with our friends from the Slice of Medieval podcast to bring you a special episode where we will look back on the year that is drawing to a close and forward to the year ahead. So without further ado, let's get on with it. So first off, Sharon, what's the best book you've read this year?
Well, I'm breaking the rules straight away because I'm going to give you two. And I've literally just finished reading them, actually. And it's Ian Ross's Battle Song and War Cry. And I just really enjoyed them. I think because I read them one after the other. War Cry's out next month, I think.
So I've got to interrupt you straight away and just say that's my choice. So I feel very bad now. I've got to find another one. And also, I'm doubly annoyed because I'm friends with Ian and he lives near me. And I saw him a couple of months ago and I said, I want to read War Cry. Can you get me an arc of it? And he said, yeah. I haven't seen it. So I'm doubly pissed off now. But yeah, it's a great book.
NetGalley. And NetGalley put an arc up of War Cry and put Battle Song back up. So I thought, actually, I can read both because I missed Battle Song when it came out. And I really enjoyed them. I mean, I'd written about the Simon de Montfort period a couple of times now, and mainly in my book about the Warren Earls of Surrey. And John de Warren, the 6th Earl, does get a couple of mentions in the book, although you don't actually hear him speak or see him. But it was interesting. I was waiting for John de Warren to appear and be wrong, but because he didn't, I could actually enjoy the book. And I did like the way Ian Ross didn't sanctify Simon de Montfort. A lot of the times when you get de Montfort mentioned, it's like he's perfect, he's the hero, he's absolutely wonderful and can't do anything wrong. And I did like the way he made him human, even though they were fighting on de Montfort's side. It was ever so interesting, very enjoyable to read.
I just thought, I mean, because I'm going to just go on now and talk about it a bit because it was my choice as well. So Battle Song, I haven't read the sequel, but I absolutely loved it. So I got an arc of it. It probably was last Christmas. So I think it probably was just at the end of 2022, but I'm counting it in 2023. And because it came out in March this year, didn't it, the book? And I absolutely loved it. And I mean, I've loved Ian's writing. His Roman stuff is great. But I just thought that he captures the feeling of the period as I imagine it, really, really well. And there's like a casual violence in the air, and there's just things happen, and everyone's very matter of fact about it. And of course, this last year I've been writing stuff set in the 19th century in the west of America, where things very lawless time, and I think it captures that feeling of what it would be like in the Middle Ages, where things really were pretty lawless. Obviously there are laws to follow, and you can be pulled up and told off, and you go to prison or get hanged or whatever. But I don't know, things just happen. There's one scene in Battle Song I loved when they're in France touring around the tournaments and stuff, and they go into some tavern or some inn somewhere, and there's an argument over a room and someone's gone into the room that the main character thinks is their room or whatever, and he goes in, and he just gets the guy and he throws him like out the window, just throws him off the balcony and down into the courtyard below, and the guy's like, you know, if it was modern day, obviously you'd be absolutely done for it. You know, the guy hurts himself, doesn't die, but he's like really badly hurt, and he sort of jumps up and he wants to have a fight and everything. All the people down below just have a laugh, and they go like, fuck off, and they just throw him out, and that's it, and everyone just carries on. It's like perfectly normal. Just beat someone up and just throw him out the window, chuck all his clothes out after him, and that's it.
I did like the way he didn't shy away from the changing sides thing as well, because that happened a lot with Simon de Montfort. People were his friend one minute and his enemy the next. So it was interesting to see that he didn't try and make it all perfect. He just told it as it was, and you got the sense that is how things happened, because they did. Edward I was friends with Simon de Montfort for a long time, and then his enemy.
Yeah.
And you've got these divided loyalties, and it's like every now and then the character meets somebody and it's like, okay, whose side are you on now?
Well, yeah, I think it's a bit like, I mean, Bernard Cornwell always talks about the big picture and the small picture, and the big story and the small picture, small story. And I think I'm much more excited by the small story, or the individual story of people. But it sounds to me, from what you're saying, you know the history of that period much better than I do, Sharon. And it sounds like Ian's really got the big story really correct, as well as the small story of the individual characters that are laid on top of the tapestry of the big intrigues and battles that are going on at court and, across the land. Yeah. So he's done in my opinion, it's a masterful, historical fiction novel. And it sounds like the sequel's good too. You've read it. I haven't read that one yet, which I will.
Warcry a bit better, actually. I've really enjoyed Battlesong, but Warcry was like, oh wow, I cannot wait for this to finish, and then I don't want it to finish, and I don't know what's going to happen. Is this guy? You really don't know. The Battle of Evesham's coming up if you know your history, and it's like, it was brutal. And you're waiting to find out exactly what happens. And I have to say, the character stories in the battle are some of the best writing I've ever read. I think he does it just for the individual characters. He really goes out of his way to present an excellent story.
Oh, brilliant! Well, I'm really looking forward to that second book. It's Warcry, isn't it? The second one it's called, and I'm looking forward to. It's going to be a trilogy. And I know that Ian would love there to be more books sold. So Ian Ross, if anybody out there is listening to this and they haven't read Battlesong or Warcry, I thoroughly recommend, and so does Sharon by the sound of it, going out and buying it and listening to it. If you're into, or listening to it on Audible or whatever, and if you haven't, if you're really into historical fiction and that sort of medieval period, it's brilliant. They're just brilliant books.
Battlesong's out in a couple of weeks, I think. Sorry, Warcry.
Warcry, yeah.
And I think that's going to be, Battlesong and Warcry are going to be my dad's Christmas present.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that on Warcry, on the cover, they've used an endorsement from Battlesong from me.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to see read the sequel. So what about you, Stephen?
That's a dastardly plan by authors. If you get your name on the front cover, you then have to buy the book because your name's on the cover, even though you haven't written the book.
Well, that's it. Guaranteed one sale at least.
Yeah. Get your name everywhere.
What about you, Stephen?
Well, I've actually only read one historical fiction novel this year, so you can probably guess what it is, Matthew.
No.
Is it? It's not one of mine, is it?
Yeah, it's A Time for Swords. That was this year I read that, wasn't it?
Aye. Probably. It took you so long.
Exactly.
About 2 years,
started it last year, finished it this year. It's basically it's the kind of stuff that could be into historical fiction. A lot of action and adventure, of course. Really good lead character. The history's all there. With the Vikings and stuff coming in. So yeah, we did a whole episode. We never did we? But I have mentioned it in the podcast before. We spoke about it. It's just a really, really good historical fiction novel, and like I say, it is the only one I've read this year, so I had to pick that, didn't I?
That's the way of becoming the winner. If you only read one book,
make it the only one.
I do.
It could have been rubbish, and it still would have been the best.
Well, that's it. Maybe it's rubbish. Well, it's done pretty well. People seem to enjoy it, and the third one's just come out. So A Day of Reckoning was out just a couple of months ago, and that's
Yep.
seems to be doing all right as well. So yeah, people have enjoyed it. But thanks very much, Stephen. So
Yeah,
very nice of you to say.
don't mention it, pal.
And I feel bad now that I didn't say that the Heathen Horde was my favourite.
You never even
But
read
it was
it.
up there. It was up there. Yeah.
I don't think you
Well,
read it,
I
did
didn't say the Heathen Horde or Day of Reckoning because you're both there and I couldn't pick between the two of you. So.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
fair enough. Yeah. So let's move swiftly on to Derek.
Right, well, I was going to pick Battle Song. Glad I didn't. But I also thought it was a great book. And I was going to pick A Time for Swords, which also I really enjoyed. But I didn't pick any of those. I went completely off-piste because I've hardly read any books at all, like Stephen, obviously. So I went for a book that isn't historical fiction at all. And there was a little story, there's a bit of a story attached to it. This book was first published in 2010, and it's a book called 61 Hours by Lee Child.
Okay. Yeah.
And over the years, I've read most of Lee Child's Jack Reacher stories, but not this one. Somehow I always missed it. Anyway, recently I started going back to the local public library, which I hadn't been to for ages. Oh, by the way, shout out, everybody. Use your public libraries, use it or lose it. So I went, mine's about 800 yards away, so it's not that difficult, really. So I went there and I happened across this book, 61 Hours, which is kind of like finding the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle down the sofa. You know, you can't believe you've actually found it. Trouble with those sort of things is you think you might be disappointed at the end of it. You've waited so long to read it. But actually, it was really good. I think it's probably one of his best. For anybody who's listening, who's never heard of Lee Child's character, Jack Reacher, if there is anybody who hasn't heard of him, he's a kind of thinking person's Terminator, only human-ish. Was in the military police, big, fast, chunky guy, which incidentally made it a bit laughable that Tom Cruise played him in a couple of films. So he played a sort of cut down Jack Reacher. Anyway.
The new guy's good, though.
Yeah,
the
he
new
is.
guy.
He is, yeah. Fabulous.
Ideal.
Just right, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just a few words about 61 Hours. 61 Hours is set in a wintry South Dakota.
Oh,
and
I've read. I remember. I was going to say, is it the one that ends in all the snow and the bunker?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's typical Jack Reacher beginning, whereas he's on a bus and it crashes. Well, I mean, you know, he's like a lucky charm, isn't he? Don't be on the same vehicle as him. So it's got all the sort of things you might expect from an action thriller. It's obviously got lots of action, lots of thrills, but it's very cold. This permeates the book. Got sort of icicles dripping from the pages. There's a Mexican drug lord. There's Russians. Did I say it was very cold? Yes, it's very cold. And basically, there's also a long distance conversation on the phone, which is an interesting side plot of the whole thing. So I loved it, and I felt, having read it this year, finally, I ought to mention it to somebody. So I'm mentioning it to you lot, and anybody else who happens to be listening.
Good stuff.
It's great. I'm a massive fan of Jack Reacher and obviously Lee Child, who wrote them or writes them or did write them. And I've read all of them. And the last couple, of course, have been written or co-written by his brother. And I have to say, the quality has dropped massively. And I'm really, this year, I normally would get them like as soon as they come out and I'd read the next one and I really not bothered. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to get given the new one for Christmas from one of my kids. And I will read it. But last year I did read the last one that came, I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was boring. It actually took me a while. I had to sort of force myself to read it, which was never the case with the Lee Child one. So if anyone ever asks, if it makes a difference changing an author to something like that, it really does. And just being their brother and happening to be a writer doesn't cut the mustard. I think there's a magic ingredient that is missing, in my opinion.
So if Matthew's kids are listening, you've still got time to exchange the book for something else.
Exactly.
I'm quite completist and loyal, as most readers are, and I think I'd be happy to read it and to be proven wrong. It's written 2 or 3 now, so it could be that there's some books are better than others. So I think who knows? He could find hit the ground eventually, hit the sort of the right speed and get it. But for me, it just felt like a different character. They felt like books that were sort of competently written with the name Jack Reacher in them, but it doesn't feel like Jack Reacher. Somehow it just feels like a different person, which is inevitable, I suppose.
Well, it shows how much of a writer there is in characters. How much it is your thing, your creation.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, moving on, but still sticking with books. So that was what we've read in the last year. What about in recent years? Have you got any other, what's the best book standout book that for you over the last few years? Stephen, have you got anything?
Nothing really historical. So I've cheated like Derek, but even worse, because I picked Def Leppard's book. Definitely, it's called, and it's just a band history, and it's got tons of photographs and stuff on the band stories about the early days and all that kind of thing. So that, and Jimmy Page put out 2 big hardbacks, coffee table books. So they were kind of the only books that I would pick as favourites of the past few years. But I suppose they've got something to do with rock, but they've got nothing to do with history. So they're good books if anybody's interested in Def Leppard or Led Zeppelin.
Well, I don't think they have to be specifically about history, do they? I mean, or historical fiction.
No.
But
it kind of feels like I'm cheating if we don't, though.
Well, I don't know. It's all good. It's all good. I was actually thinking there's a couple of books that were sort of high up there that I've read, which again are like these coffee table kind of books. I've read. I can't remember what one was called now, about the history of like Dungeons and Dragons artwork and stuff, and that was really interesting. And I've got like another big one about the making of Conan the Barbarian, the movie. And things like that. They're really interesting, these sort of retrospective books looking back at the historical sort of how things happened, like say band histories. I'm reading a Led Zeppelin biography at the moment, what's it called, when giants walk the earth.
Is that Mick Wall?
That's the Mick Wall one.
I've read that one. That's okay.
It's pretty good. It's all right.
Plus,
anyway,
Def Leppard have been around that long now. They probably do count as history anymore.
Aye, that's true.
That's another good point. Yeah,
so not as long as Led Zeppelin, but not far off it.
Yeah. What about you, Sharon? Sort of recent years.
Okay, I'm going to embarrass Stephen now. I think he probably knows this because of the way I was gushing about it at the time. But it's Lucia.
Oh, excellent.
By Stephen A. McKay. That book affected me so much. It's about a Roman slave girl being enslaved in England, and it's just the total powerlessness of this girl's life. And I read it, I think, just after the Americans pulled out of Afghanistan, and women were losing rights in Afghanistan every single day. Something else was being taken away from them. And at the same time, I'm reading Lucia through tears most of the time, because it's one of those books that really touches you, and I couldn't read another book for weeks afterwards without thinking that it wasn't good enough. Because I think Stephen's writing in it is some of the best I've read. And like I say, it has affected me so much that it's definitely one of the best.
And it's probably my lowest rated, in terms of 5-star ratings or whatever. It's
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I think it's just too harrowing for a lot of people.
It is harrowing, but it is so worth reading. And
well, it had to be realistic, so
there is a little bit of hope that you come away with at the end. Thankfulness that we don't live in that society anymore.
Yeah.
And just it was breathtaking.
Thanks very much. That's very nice to hear.
High praise indeed. Sharon's read everything.
That's true.
Yeah, Sharon has read everything. So for her to say that it stands out over the last few years of everything she's read is amazing. I've read
everything of all yours, all three of you.
Yeah, I know. So Derek,
the other thing I was going to say was for Matthew, The Blood and the Blade, I think, was my favourite of yours. And Derek's was Feud, which was the first of his Wars of the Roses books. And that was just something totally different to the regular Wars of the Roses books. And of course, one of his leading characters is Eleanor Elder, who became a heroine of mine. And every woman who's ever read one of those books, because she actually fights, but she doesn't fight out of her gender sort of thing.
She doesn't fight like a man.
Yeah.
Well,
So, yeah, I've got a favourite of each of it and every one of you, but I think Lucia just tipped it because, well, Stephen made me cry.
We
that's fair
don't
enough.
mind. That sounds good. That sounds
I'm
good.
sure
That's
I
fair
cried
enough.
quite a few times when I was writing it as well.
It's fair enough, but I mean, Stephen makes me cry quite often. But you know, it's just
With laughter,
he's-
hopefully.
well, yeah. Well, let's not go there.
It's just, to
So-
me, it's one of the signs of a good book. If it can bring out your emotion,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you know that it's got you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, well, brilliant. Praise indeed. And you
Yeah.
mentioned Derek's book Feud and the series about the Wars of the Roses. And in fact, my highlight, and I was thinking really along the lines of historical fiction here, the highlight that came to mind when I was thinking about the questions for me is Toby Clement's series, the Kingmaker series. Which came out, the first one's 2014, and the last one, there's 4 books in the series, came out in 2017. It starts with the Winter Pilgrims, Broken Faith, Divided Souls, and then Kingdom Come. And again, set in the Wars of the Roses, which is not that popular a period. So for me, I think those are the first books perhaps that I'd read in that period. And I don't often, I don't read that much. I have that much time to read. And so I often, I very rarely read a whole series. So if I'll read like the first book in a series, if it's, it might be okay, and then I might read maybe another one. But to actually read all 4 in this series for me was quite unusual, and I really, really liked them. They're just brilliant. The characterization, the 2 main characters is a man and a woman, and I don't know. I think I'm saying, Sharon, you're nodding. You've read them.
Yeah.
Derek, I'm assuming you've read them. I don't know, Stephen, if you've read them. But
I've read them. I've had very long conversations with Toby about them as well, because I think the beginning of Winter Pilgrims is among the best beginnings I think I've read in historical fiction. It's really good.
Yeah, it's just, for me, the whole thing, they're incredibly inspirational. And I started writing Wolf of Wessex when I don't know if I'd listened to the audiobooks of all of these by that point. I think maybe I had, and I decided to write Wolf of Wessex in a sort of two-hander style. Each chapter was one of the 2 main characters, just the same as Toby Clement's books, just purely because I just read these books and I really loved the way he'd done that. So it's in Wolf of Wessex, it's an older man and a younger girl, but again, it's like you get the girl man all the way through, which is exactly what he's done as well. And it just works brilliantly well and keeps the pace of the story moving forward. But yeah, his descriptions of the period and the grittiness of it, and his incredible, again, a bit like we were saying about Ian Ross's books, like the real believability of the world. You feel like you're there. It feels like these writers have actually been there. They've traveled back through time, they've lived it for a few days, and then they've come back and written it down. I mean, for me that's the sign of fantastic historical fiction, where it may not be realistic, but it feels like it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and it feels incredibly authentic. So what about you, Derek?
Well, I have picked a historical fiction one this time, but it's a more recent. It's unlike me, actually. I read hardly anything that's modern history, but I've picked one by somebody I do know slightly, David Gilman. It's called Night Flight to Paris.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm sure others have read it as well.
I read that one. Yeah.
Set in 1943 in sort of wartime occupied Paris. Clues in the title, really. I'd read his medieval stuff, David Gilman's medieval stuff, and I thought, well, okay, let's read something that it came out, and I thought, well, give it a go. I don't read many wartime things at all, but it was so well done. It was just so well done. He got the mood, I think, of the whole place during the war better than I've come across before. It's always a bit, I don't know, it's always a bit sort of the resistance of the good guys and the Germans are the bad guys, and it's very one-dimensional normally in those sort of wartime things in films and books. But I felt that he managed to sort of grasp the nettle in a way and talk about the differences between the Germans and between the Allied sort of groups, the resistance, gangsters, and all the rest of it. So yeah, it was. I mean, the action was good as well, and the suspense. But I just felt it. You were talking about sort of gritty realism. Again, I agree with you. That's a mark of something that's very good historical fiction.
I think David's David's got the experience from his
Yeah.
jobs and his life, you
Yeah.
know. We had
Yeah.
him on here. He's one of my favourite guests we've had on, actually. I really like
Yeah.
David, just as a guy. I should really read his books as well.
He'd probably like that, yeah. As we're going to see him next year, you probably should.
Yeah. Hopefully, yes.
Hopefully, yeah. So, well, that I'm going to carry on with you, Derek. Moving on to the next question, which is about what's the best podcast episode of the last year? And this question is basically worded in such a way that I don't know if any of us are sure what it's asking. Are we asking? Well, you answer it as you see fit. So, what's the best
I'll
podcast
answer it, and
episode?
then you can see whether that was what you were expecting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to choose one of Sharon and my Slice of Medieval episodes simply because I don't listen to much else, except, of course, Rock, Paper and Swords. But this one was memorable for a number of reasons. This was our podcast earlier in the year with the legendary historical novelist Bernard Cornwell. And they say don't meet your heroes, but it's fair to say I wasn't disappointed. And I was a bit apprehensive because I'd heard Bernard talk at some conference or meeting somewhere or other about 9 o'clock in the morning. He seemed to be extremely grumpy, mainly because it was 9 o'clock in the morning, I think. But yeah, anyway, it didn't start very well because when I logged onto Zoom, as you do, and waited for Bernard to appear, he didn't. And it was a bit early, so I thought, oh, well, I wonder if he stood us up. But anyway, I sort of waited, and then this disembodied voice announced, Derek, I've got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened when we had him on as well.
Well, I'd heard Bernard speak, so I recognised the voice. And he said that his webcam had died, and the upshot was that we recorded it with just the sound, which obviously is the important bit. Now, it's perfectly possible that Bernard was sitting there in his socks and underpants.
Well, that's what I said to him.
Didn't want to present that to me.
He did the same to us. I think
exactly the same.
Exactly the same. And he made out that his webcam had died just that minute, or that day or whatever, and it was an unusual thing. And this was like 6 months before you guys had him on. So I think, and I
joked broken again.
I joked with him and said that he was sitting there in the nude, and he just laughed it off, carried on.
Yeah, it probably was.
See, I didn't go that far. I was just thinking he sat in bed in his pajamas rather than in his office, because I've seen him. We did an interview with him for Historical Writers Forum. We did a Zoom meeting, and he had his camera on for that.
Yes.
And he was in this magnificent library with a sword on the hook behind him. And it's like, I had this image of him like that when we were talking to him, but he could have well been in his pajamas in bed.
Maybe.
With a laptop on his knee.
Well, he was charming throughout, I have to say. And we asked him about all sorts of books and history that he must have written about 2 decades earlier. And he was very good. He was very understanding that we wanted to ask about those. So it was a highlight for me, certainly. And I know Sharon was quite excited.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can imagine. I mean, Stephen, it's one of our first interviews actually on the podcast was with Bernard. We were absolutely shitting ourselves, I think it's fair to say, because he is such a hero, and so for all of us writers, and so to meet someone, even though it's over Zoom, it's quite nerve-wracking.
I managed not to say I'd been reading him for over 40 years, luckily.
Yeah.
Yes. It's one of those things.
You might take offence at that.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it would be. Is it offensive? I mean, it's
nice
to know. It's nice to know, but I make him think a bit of his mortality.
Well, I thought he might then be adding up the numbers and think I was older than I am. I was about 12 when I started reading him.
That's what we all want, isn't it?
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Lifelong
what about you, Stephen? What's a standout podcast?
Well, I wasn't sure, like you said, I wasn't sure what you meant, so I was kind of thinking Uncanny, BBC's Paranormal podcast. But if we're going for like our own, I would say the one we did with Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull. Just again because he's like my hero. I've got the big picture of him up the wall there. And again, we were shitting ourselves because He is such a big name, and he can be grumpy if you rub him the wrong way. And we were supposed to get, what was it, 15 minutes or something, Matthew? We were supposed to get.
Well, yeah, so his publicist, so I've actually said the same. I've put Ian Anderson as my highlight of the year of podcast episodes. And I think it was part of it was the build-up we had to it. I'm talking about from my own point of view, but I mean, I think I'd really sort of built it up in my mind, even bigger than it maybe was.
Yeah.
But he's hugely successful, over 60 million albums sold and stuff. And it was a weird one because they wanted us to interview him. His PR person said they scheduled it, and it's 9:00 in the morning on Bank Holiday Monday. So they think, okay, right. So obviously that's fine. We'll do it. And then and they said to us, 15 minutes, if you're lucky, maybe 25 minutes or something. But when he says he's going, he's going.
Yeah, he just goes.
Like, okay, we'll just get on. We'll ask the questions and as quick as we can, and get the big questions in first, and then we'll see how it goes. But in the end,
it was like an
for
hour.
ages.
Yeah, it was at least an hour.
We couldn't get him off. It's like an hour and 20 minutes. In the end, we ran out of questions. We were
he was laughing and joking and everything. It was so relaxed, and it was just really, really good by the end of it. So it was a kind of highlight of my life, really, because he is Jethro Tull are my favourite band. So it was a dream come true, really.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. So we started off at the very beginning. So again, he didn't have his camera on at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so he just appeared, and he joined the Zoom call. So you see his name there. It's just black, so there's nothing. He said, "Oh, we can't see you, Ian," and so he sort of begrudgingly turned his camera on. But again, I don't think he wanted to, interact face to face, as it were. But he did. He turned it on, and then he just said, "Right, no preamble. What's your first question?"
Yeah,
and that was how he started. So there was not a single "Hello, how are you?"
Nice to meet you.
Yep. You normally get a couple of minutes of sort of chit chat with people. Sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, but there's some sort of breaking of the ice. But nothing at all. And so we thought, okay, but
here we go.
I'd listened to quite a few podcasts and interviews with him beforehand to see, what people had asked and how he responded to things. And as Stephen was saying, and I think this is partly why I was so nervous about it myself, was that sometimes if people ask rubbish questions, he really doesn't take kindly to it, and he just gets quite dry and matter of fact, but very sort of will cut people off and sort of make them look stupid, really. But sometimes with reason, because the people
they're wasting his time. His time's valuable.
Yeah.
But so in my mind, I thought we need to make sure the questions are good. We've got to be professional. You want to keep it light though, so it's keeping that balance of sort of making it fun to listen to without being really showing that you're very nervous, but also being professional and not wasting his time. So I think we got there, and it was okay, and he warmed to us, I think.
Yeah. Well, you must have made him feel comfortable.
Yeah, I think we definitely did by the end.
He took the piss. He took the piss out of both of us. Right. He was laughing
at Matthew, because Matthew had stuck a record up behind him, and he was laughing. It was only Jethro Tull record Matthew owned, which I think is true.
It's true. I've got like two. I own two.
It was brilliant. Really good.
So I actually did take a note as well of something else, because I didn't know if we were talking about our own episodes or others. If we talk about other podcasts, I'll just give a shout out for a podcast called Script Notes. I can't speak. Which is Craig Mazin and John. God, I should know this. I listen to it all the time. Anyway, the guy who presents it, John, whoever, I can't remember his name. And anyway, they're two script writers from America, written big films and TV series and things. And they did one episode this year with Neil Gaiman, and it was John August. That's the name of the other presenter. Gosh. Anyway, and they did an interview with Neil Gaiman, and it was just really interesting because obviously Neil Gaiman's worked in TV and done lots of TV and film and stuff, but also, of course, he's an incredible novelist. So to hear him answer lots of questions about adaptation into comics and his comics into TV series, and how to write comics, how he's worked in all these different areas of writing, and it was really, really interesting. He talked about, obviously he's written books with Terry Pratchett as well, and so he was talking about how he couldn't think of the ending for American Gods, which is his only book, I think, that I've read actually of Neil Gaiman's, and he was stuck on something. He doesn't plan in great detail, and he was stuck, and he said he was at some sort of, I think, literary festival or something with with Terry Pratchett or a book signing or something, and he mentioned this to Terry Pratchett, and Terry Pratchett came up with a suggestion, which I'm not going to tell now because you can listen to the podcast if people want to go off and listen to it. But I just thought it was brilliant that because I could just imagine, me and Stephen or with one of you guys, on the train. He said they're on the train. He was just, I'm a bit stuck. I don't really know how to end this book. I've set this all up and I don't really know how to finish it. And he told the situation, and Terry just said, "Why don't you just do this?" And he's like, "Oh, okay, brilliant." And he said, "I did."
Genius, Terry Pratchett.
This is great. So anyway, so that's and I listen to that podcast every week, and it's really interesting, especially if you're into films and TV.
Yeah.
That world. But what about you, Sharon?
Well, let me just tell the listeners that I was the one who suggested this question, so it's my fault that it's ambiguous.
Right.
Or rather, I left it to you guys to interpret what I meant. I thought it could be either our own podcast or somebody else's. For a slice of medieval, I think the best one had to be, like Derek said, the Bernard Cornwell one, because I've been such a big fan. He is my favourite living author.
Yeah.
My favourite ever author is Alexandre Dumas, but Bernard Cornwell's the only one who's still alive. And it was a real, I couldn't believe it when I emailed them and his PA, and she said, "Yep, Bernard will do it." And I was gobsmacked.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my God, we're going to be talking about the Cornwell." As Derek says, I was a little giddy beforehand. I think I calmed down at the time when we were actually talking.
Calm down, yes, yeah.
But I was so excited. But we also do some episodes where it's just me and Derek. And I always introduce them as, "I'm sorry, it's just me and Derek this week." And I've been told off about that because people do seem to enjoy them. And Derek says, "You've got to stop saying it's just us this week," because we actually, and these are they're investigative episodes. We decide on a topic a few weeks in advance, and each of us goes away and researches it ourselves, and then we come and discuss it. And I think
was I supposed to be researching those?
Yes, you're supposed to be researching.
Oh, right, okay.
Rather than just letting me
next
do it
time.
all the work. But I think the best one we did was Edward the Elder, the son of Alfred the Great, brother of Ethelfled, or Athelflaed, I think Annie might have told us it was, didn't she?
Yeah.
And it was just fascinating because neither of us had done much on this guy. All we knew was the lame Edward from The Last Kingdom. So it was really interesting to actually go into looking into Edward himself. And I really enjoyed that episode. And I think I learned an awful lot. And it was a brilliant way to highlight somebody who is often forgotten and overlooked.
Yeah.
His father's more famous, his son Athelstan is more famous and gets more credit. So it was who, even his sister's more famous. So it's like, who was Edward the Elder? Athelflaed's brother.
and in those days it took a lot for a woman to get famous, so
yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting you say about doing episodes when it's just the two of you. So we've done quite a few, when it's just the two of us, but we've increasingly done fewer and fewer of them because we're just so chock-a-block with people coming on with interviews, and it's trying to find the time. And actually we keep saying we need to basically make time to do. We've had ideas for episodes that just the two of us, and I think like you say, people, as Derek's right, that you shouldn't apologize because people actually enjoy those episodes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's part of the reason why people listen to to the podcast, and it's definitely I really enjoy them as well when it's just Stephen and me talking about specific topics.
Yeah.
So we just need to find the time to and basically not book any guests for a while to record some of that. That's the difficulty.
That's the thing. We always say when we're planning who we're going to have on and who we're emailing, and it's like, well, if we put so and so there and so there, we could always do one of our own in between.
Yeah.
So we actually now schedule in when we're doing one, so that we make sure that we get just our investigative ones as well, because they are fun to do.
Yeah.
And people really do seem to enjoy them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, moving on from podcasts.
We better move on quickly
Yeah. Well,
Is it still Thursday?
Yeah. So moving on from podcasts and we're moving on to writing. So what's your best writing career moment of 2023, and your worst, if you want to tell us that as well? Sharon, do you want to go first?
Yeah, actually, they're both in the same moment as well. Well, in the same couple of hours. It was, other than having Bernard Cornwell on A Slice of Medieval, it was the book launch for my latest book, King John's Right-Hand Lady, the story of Nicola de la Haye, because I managed to do the launch in Lincoln on the 806th anniversary of the Battle of Lincoln, which Nicola had been involved in 1217.
Wow.
And it was to a full house at the Lincoln Museum, and everybody had pulled out the stops to make sure that we could do it on the anniversary. It was one of the things I'd had planned. If it was coming out in May, I wanted the launch on the anniversary. The book wasn't actually due out until the 30th, but Pen and Sword, my publishers, printed it early just to make sure that I had books for the launch. And Linden Books, who organised the launch, were absolutely fantastic. So it was a sellout. Every seat was full. And it was just such a great night, because I'd been writing about Nicola for about 8 years by the time this book came out. So it was like, it was one of those real career moments.
Yeah.
And then during the talk, somebody asked me a question, and it was like, what's the difference between a mark and a pound? And I'd explained it in the book. But at that moment,
you forgot.
I couldn't have told you for the life of me.
Yeah.
But luckily, in the audience was the lady who'd written the foreword for the book, who is the academic expert on Nicola de la Haye. And me and her, Professor Louise Wilkinson, had been meeting regularly for coffees and talking about Nicola for a good few months. And she was in the front row of the audience. I got this question. She's a lecturer at Lincoln University. And I just went, Louise. And she said the answer. Didn't have to think about it. It's like, this is she does this every day, she's doing medieval history every day. She just gave the answer perfectly. And I'm just
so what is the difference? You've got to tell us now.
Oh, I can't remember. What's a third of the other? But I can never remember.
It's about, isn't it? It's 6 and 8 pence or something in old money. There's multiples of 3 shillings and 4 pence, I think, but I can never remember which multiple is actually a mark.
Right.
Okay, so
they're just used for accounting rather than actually in physical presence. So
yeah, exactly. There wasn't a coin, was there?
No.
So it's like guineas as well.
Yeah,
because a guinea is what, a pound and a shilling, isn't it? Guineas, or something. It's all very strange.
But that's the only time I've ever just gone, it's gone out of my head. But luckily Louise was there to save the day for me.
I'm impressed that's the only time anything's gone out of your head, because things go out of my head more often than they come into it.
Yeah, I was going to say, yes, I mean, doing a presentation or a book launch in front of a full house and talking about history sounds great, but yeah, you're opening yourself up for, for those sort of questions. So you're lucky it was only one. And I still haven't ever had a book launch, so I'm very jealous that you've had a book launch with a full house of people all clamoring to hear you speak about your book.
Yeah,
so
like a rock star.
Yeah. Sharon the rock star Connolly. So
yeah, because I need more names, don't I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Derek, what about you? What about your highlight of the year, your writing career?
Potential. I think a good one, but potentially a bad one in a sense, in that I decided earlier in the year that I've wanted to write a modern thriller for ages, and I'm probably not the only historical fiction writer in that particular situation. But I thought, right, this year, you know how you make resolutions perhaps at the beginning of the year? I said, right, this year, I'm definitely going to start writing it. So I started writing it, and it was all a bit new because different genre. Suddenly, I've got no historical research to do, but I've got some other things to consider, which I've not considered before. Location, what it's like, all the rest of it. Anyway, so to start with, I felt I was on fairly shaky ground. But when I was about a third of the way in, I had one of those sort of moments when you're writing, when you think, yeah, actually, I think I can do this. I've got, I've sort of got there
Yeah,
so
you're
far.
in the groove, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In the groove. And I just thought, yeah, I haven't finished it, but it's going to work. And that was quite a revelation, because I really, whenever you tackle something new, you're always very doubtful, because you're going out of your comfort zone, aren't you? All the things you've built up are really not of a great deal of help. So yeah, there was just a moment there, and I thought, yeah, this is going to be okay, I think. So hopefully it will be.
So have you did you say you haven't finished it yet?
I haven't finished it yet, no, but I'm rather further. I'm about 2/3 of the way through now. I know how it ends. I always know how it ends. It's just the bit in between.
In between.
Yes. Well, funnily enough, I mean, looking at my best writing career moment of 2023, it's pretty much similar to yours, Derek, in that I haven't written a thriller, but I've wanted to write a Western, a book set in the late 19th century for a long time. And this was the year that I decided I'm going to pull. I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to bite the bullet and do it. And I did it. And that was coupled with visiting the States and actually going horse riding in Oregon and staying on a ranch, which was incredible. Those two things together. But so I totally understand where you're coming from, and that sort of trepidation of starting something different. Although I keep telling myself it's just historical fiction. It's just historical fiction. It's just set in a different time period. But having to do the historical research and being aware that people, there's going to be people reading, hopefully, the book that will be absolute experts in this. And there's so much information. There's newspapers, for every day,
photographs, everything.
There's photographs, everything. So people can easily pick holes in what you're writing when you're writing about something so much closer to our own time. But anyway, just like you, I got over that initial fear or horror or whatever. And by the end of it, I remember sort of writing. I finished it and I've handed it in, and I've heard my first feedback was, I've got some things to tweak and change. But funnily enough, I mean, one of the main tweaks was the editor said, the first chapter or two is a bit shaky, maybe you can. And so you could really tell, I think, that I was sort of finding my way. Those first couple of chapters. But by the end of it, I remember sort of hitting the last couple of chapters and thinking, I've got this now. Now I totally know who these people are now, what this is all about. I'm finished. So,
book two then.
Maybe I need to write another one. But what about you, Stephen?
Well, it's getting my books in Waterstones would be the highlight, because I mean, I've sold a lot of Kindle editions and Kindle Unlimited page reads, like into the hundreds of thousands, but I've never had a book in an actual shop. So to get to Waterstones in Glasgow, see the book and sign it, that was a really big thing.
Yeah.
But perhaps the worst as well, I'd sent a signed copy. Well, I sent a few, sold them signed copies to people, readers, and one of them sent me a photograph yesterday on Facebook Messenger saying, I take it you're a bit busy there, Stephen. And I'd only written half the line on his book. I always write a line out of each book. I'd only written half of it, and I hadn't even bothered signing my name. And I just put it in the envelope and posted it to him. So, I mean, I thought, it's quite worrying, really. Like, how could I have done that? How could I have just stopped
busy.
Halfway through writing that, I said,
your kids or someone.
I assumed that's what happened.
Blame the dog.
Aye, maybe the dog started barking or something, or jumped into my lap. I don't know, but it just seemed so bizarre that halfway through a sentence, I just stopped, closed the book, put it in an envelope, went to the shop, and posted it.
It's bringing something back to me, because I'm pretty sure that a couple of years ago I sent someone a book with the wrong name in, because I signed I sent it to the two wrong people. So people
just a mix up.
Easily done.
Like
Easily done.
So these things happen. But getting your book in the in Waterstones, in proper bookshops, brick and mortar bookshops, is definitely a moment. But it makes me think of my recurring worst moment of 2023 and every other year is whenever I walk past any Waterstones or any bookshop, I feel the necessity to go in and look and see if my books are on the shelf. And 9 times out of 10, or maybe 99 times out of 100, they're not.
Right.
And so it's a bit depressing. And when I was in the States, I was in the biggest bookshop in the States, Powell's in Portland. And of course, me and my wife there. She's a librarian, loves books as well. And we were with another couple, and the lady, the other couple, works for Barnes and Noble, so massively into books as well. And we all went into Powell's, and of course, none of my books anywhere. Very depressing. And this woman works for Barnes and Noble, and I went to her store, and she, as we were walking in the store, she said, Don't look for your books. There's none of your books in there. I was like, what sort of friend are you?
Yeah.
She said, I have no sway or about what they buy in the shop. I'm not the not the guy who buys the books. But anyway, yeah. So that's for any writers out there. I'm sure, unless you're like the Childs of this world, you'll feel the pain of going into a bookshop to look for your books and not finding them.
Yeah.
So anyway, onwards and upwards. Still, the fact that the books are out there is definitely a plus. Yeah. So what are you looking? On that note, what are we looking forward to in 2024? And I will go first and just say I'm looking forward to, most of all, and slightly terrified by the prospect of this Western / historical fiction set in the 19th century, which I'm going to call it Victoriana historical fiction. Anyway, it's getting published in the July of 2024. It's called Dark Frontier, and I am looking forward to it to see what people think, but I'm also kind of terrified. And I'm also looking forward to Kevin Costner's 2 Westerns that are coming out either side of my book coming out. So he's got 2 Westerns. He's got one coming out the week before, at the end of June, and then my book comes out on the 4th of July. And then I think on in August, he's got another book coming. He's got another movie coming out. So the second part of his Horizon movie. So it's going to be a summer of Westerns for me, and I'm looking forward to that. So what about you, Derek?
Well, to repeat the point, I guess I'm hoping that the thriller will get finished and will be out next year. I'm also going to publish the first of a series of novels set in the anarchy. In the 12th century. Sharon's read it, so that's something. She's the only person on the planet virtually. Not quite, but nearly. We've got the H&S conference to look forward to next September, where we'll all be there, plying our trade, as it were. But for me, the biggest thing next year is my daughter's getting married a week after that conference, so it'll be a huge family occasion. And I've got my brother coming over and other relatives coming over from New Zealand. So it's going to be quite a big occasion. So that's, family comes first always, doesn't it? No matter what. But so that's the biggest thing for me next year.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, congratulations.
Congratulations. Yeah. And I'd made a note that I wasn't checking my notes, but I remembered jotting down that I'm really looking forward to the Historical Novel Society conference as well, because all 4 of us are actually going to be appearing. Then it's in September next year for anyone listening. And it's in Devon in the UK, and it's and it's going to be great. There's all sorts of people there. Bernard Cornwell's going to be there, of course, and lots of other big names, and us.
Well, we follow Bernard Cornwell.
He's our warm-up
act. Our panel is immediately after Bernard Cornwell, so I'm just hoping the audience decide to stay.
All right, okay.
Yes. Okay. Well, we've got Elizabeth Chadwick and David Gilman and you, Matthew. So
that's true. Yeah,
a big draw.
And Rock Paper Swords is going to be the roving podcast.
That sounds great.
Yeah,
which will be an interesting thing. Of course, we don't actually know what we're going to be doing, but it should be fun.
Yeah, we'll think of some.
How roving are you going to be, or are you going to base yourselves in the bar and let everybody rove with you?
I think that sounds like a very good plan. Could be. I think we'll rove around a bit, and we'll probably try to interview people. So we'll try to call you guys and other writers to get into a little quiet place and do sort of 10-15 minute shorter interviews with people.
But if I do,
that'd be good. And interviewing some of the attendees as well, and of course reporting on some of the different events and things. Should be great.
Yeah, it sounds
So,
good.
so what about you, Stephen? What are you looking forward to, apart from obviously those things that we've already mentioned?
Yeah, well, in terms of writing, I'll actually finish writing the third book of my Alfred trilogy, even though the first one is just out. The second one I've finished, and the third one will have to be delivered as well next year. So, and then I can move back to my Warrior Druid of Britain for a wee while and do another one of them. But just in general terms, you can obviously hear I've got sinus problems, and hopefully that's going to be getting sorted within the next month anyway. So hopefully the next time we record a podcast episode, I'll be able to talk completely normally for a change.
What, without that weird accent?
Oh no, I'll always have that, Matthew.
Oh, okay. I thought the sinus problem was going to just clear that up, and you were going to start sounding.
You never
normal.
know. Stranger things have happened. Start talking French or something.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's people who get like brain traumas and suddenly start speaking a different language.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing your improved dulcet tones. So, Sharon, what about you? What are you looking forward to most?
Well, I was going to say HNS 2024 and meeting you guys in person.
Obviously,
which I think is going to be fun.
Nice, yeah.
Especially Stephen, because I've met Matthew and Derek before, but I haven't actually met Stephen.
Yeah, I've not met anybody within the historical
that's right.
Even though he did come to Sherwood Forest a few years ago, but didn't tell me he was down the road.
That's right. That was last year. Yeah.
And I was in Lincoln and didn't see you either, but I'd seen you before. So yes, we were all guilty of that.
Otherwise, I've actually got 2, possibly 3 books out next year in one year, which is a bit of a. But my one out in January, Women of the Anarchy, I wrote before I wrote the biography of Nicola de la Haye, but my publisher Zamberley had a backlog after COVID. So that is finally going to see the light of day, which I'm really excited about. Luckily, I haven't reread it and thought, oh my God, what did you write, Sharon? It actually does read okay, thankfully. So I'm looking forward to that coming out in January. And then I'm changing eras in June when my Heroines of the Tudor World come out, so which is my first sequel. My first book was Heroines of the Medieval World, so Heroines of the Tudor World is a sequel.
They're always popular, aren't they, Tudors?
Yeah.
Well, I just thought it is a bit of a, everybody writes about the Tudors. I suppose I should do one and see what happens.
Why not? The audience is there, so.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing is, there are so many well-known women in the Tudor period. How did you manage to limit it?
Oh, tell me about it. There are literally and there's so much more information about them.
Yeah.
Than with the medieval book, it was about 700 years of women I was writing about. Whereas at least with the Tudors, it's limited to just over 100 years.
Yeah.
So you can do the same kind of women, and there's plenty of information about all of them. There's not. Like with the medieval book, I'm scrabbling around for the slightest bit of information. With the Tudors, it's like, okay, I've got loads. Which do I choose? So I've got about the same amount of women and the same titles that I used for chapters in Medieval World. So it's just different women and different stories, but the same ideas and themes. Right. I'm hoping it worked.
Well, good luck.
So finally, as we are in the Christmas period now, I thought we'll end on a Christmas question, which is, what is your favourite Christmas song? So I'm going to say to Stephen first, what's your favourite Christmas song?
Well, it's got to be Jethro Tull's Ring Out Solstice Bells. Obviously, Jethro Tull have a whole album full of Christmas songs, which are fantastic. Of the really popular ones, I really like the Slade one, Merry Christmas Everybody. And there'll soon be another classic coming out because Matthew and me are writing a Rock, Paper, Swords Christmas song as well at the moment.
Oh, wow.
So I've recorded most of the music for that. We're just got to come up with some lyrics for it that Matthew will then sing. So, yeah, a modern classic in the making.
Yeah, I'm sure it will rival those other songs you mentioned.
Slade and Wizard.
If it's as good as Wizard and Slade, I think it should be. I mean, probably better than them. I'm sure. I mean, we just
more
I
popular.
mean, even if nobody ever hears it, we can just tell ourselves it's because we didn't manage to get the publicity, but that's not our fault.
Well, it's got a good guitar solo on it anyway. I'm sure of that.
Well, so you say. What about you, Derek?
Well, I've got two. One was Merry Christmas, Everybody by Slade, which Stephen's mentioned, because that's sort of always been there since my student days, forever. It's just sort of been part of the tapestry of Christmas. You go into a shopping mall and it's there and you can't escape it, really.
Yeah.
But my absolute favourite one is A Fairy Tale of New York by the Pogues, with the fabulous and much missed Kirsty MacColl. That for me, if I hear that, I just have to listen to it. Yeah. I can't walk out of the room.
Well, I'd written down 3 songs as like my top sort of Christmas songs, and you've mentioned 2 of them, Derek. So, and of course Stephen as well. So the Slade one, Merry Christmas Everybody, Fairy Tale of New York, and the third one is Do They Know It's Christmas? The original Band-Aid.
Yeah. I thought about that one. Yeah.
So yeah, I really like it. I like the way people say the lyrics are cheesy and all the rest of it, but I think it's got a good sentiment.
Of course, it's cheesy. It's a Christmas song.
No, but people take umbrage now at some of the lyrics and the whole thing about it's in I don't know, the whole thing about the saying that do they know it's Christmas in Africa and all this sort of stuff, and saying it's some sort of demeaning of the African nations and all this sort of stuff. But I think just taking the sentiment.
It was done to raise money in the 80s.
It was to raise money.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And
but
so
it did.
And it raised a lot of money, and it was great. And I just think it's a great song. I think the melodies are great, and I think the delivery, all the different singers there together, is just fantastic.
Yeah.
So, what about you, Sharon? What about you? What's your favourite Christmas song?
All right, I was going to come up with something different because I thought everybody's going to laugh, but I was a Shaky fan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Merry Christmas, everyone. It does it every time. Like you say, it's just that as soon as you hear it, it's like,
takes you back.
It's Christmas.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you
big Shakin' Stevens.
So,
Shakin' Stevens is great. Yeah.
I remember that drunk interview he did. That was great.
I don't know that one.
Well, have you not seen it? He's on the telly. I don't remember what show it was, but he's absolutely steaming drunk and he's just acts like an idiot the whole way through. It's brilliant.
I'll have to go check that out on YouTube afterwards.
Well, I now remind myself. It was him, wasn't it?
I don't know.
This is your dream, Stephen.
I'm starting to wonder that. I'm going to have to look this up. I'm sure it was
the drunken interview that is that I always think of is what's his name? The
George Best.
Shane.
No, the actor.
George Best one I always think of on
the actor who died. I can't remember his name now. Gosh,
Oliver Reed.
Names.
Oliver Reed.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Oliver Reed and his incredible drunken thing with, I think it was Keith Moon or something, might have been on the same show or something.
Was it Parkinson or something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or something.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah.
I'm a wild child, baby. That one, is that the one when he starts singing?
They were different times, though, weren't they?
Oh, exactly.
Get that these days.
Well, he had the most rock and roll death though as well. Oliver Reed was when he was filming Gladiator, and it was didn't he get into like a drinking match with some Maltese fishermen or something, and he ended up drinking like I don't know how many bottles of whatever whiskey and rum and stuff, and he was doing things like hanging them off the balcony, holding people up, lifting people over his head and stuff, and he just died of a heart attack. I mean, it's just like his heart gave up, and that was it. But rock and roll.
I've just found that it's Shakin' Stevens, but it's Richard Madeley that's interviewing him.
Oh, brilliant.
And
I'd probably want to get drunk before
you said that before me.
Well, he's actually just jumped on top of Richard Madeley. I mean, the whole body's just jumped up on top of him. He's obviously drunk.
I'd probably nutted.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So you need to look it up on YouTube later. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Okay, do that. So, well, brilliant. So lots of looking back, looking forward as well. It's been brilliant having you, having all of us together, doing this crossover joint thing. It's been great fun. Yeah. So maybe we'll see how people react to it. And you never know, maybe do something similar in the future. Maybe get different guests on, have a big sort of Christmas thing, in the future.
Jamboree.
Jamboree,
karaoke.
Well, Derek and I did. We did a Christmas special last year of deciding who we'd invite to which historical characters we'd invite to dinner, and we nearly came to blows over who we'd allow in and who we wouldn't. So this year was like, what should we do this year? And I said, why don't we see if Matthew and Stephen would like to do one, and we'll do a Christmas special. And it's like, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys. It's been
it's a good idea. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming up with the idea, and thanks for inviting us all, to do it together. And it's been brilliant, really good fun. And to everybody listening, Merry Christmas to everyone.
Merry Christmas, yes.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
And a Happy New Year.
Thanks very much to Matthew Harffy and Stephen A. McKay for joining A Slice of Medieval Christmas special. And thank you to all our listeners for staying with us throughout the year. We do have a bonus episode for you coming out just before Christmas, with Derek and I discussing the influence and power of the Woodvilles. So do join us for that. But just for now, enjoy the Christmas season.
And if you enjoyed our podcast, why not subscribe to ensure you don't miss the next one? Goodbye.